Hi everybody, I'm Professor Nick Tooker. I'm a professor of practice at the University of Massachusetts, and I'm here at the Meriden Water Pollution Control Facility. So you can see some solar panels over there. Here's the facility, and I'm gonna take you on a quick tour. There's a lot of construction going on right now. They're in the middle of an upgrade project, so that's why I have my hard hat, vest, and glasses on. There's gonna be a lot of external noise, so I may have to do a voiceover over this, but we're gonna take a walk around and learn about wastewater treatment. So the first part of treatment at this facility, over here, they have a pump station. So there, all of the raw wastewater is pumped up so that it can flow by gravity for most of the rest of the way. After that, it comes into this building here. And you can see some screens that they have. Maybe we'll walk around to the other side and try and see them. So these screens are enclosed right now, but if we were able to look inside there, we would see some bars that are all lined up. And those are to catch kind of big things that are coming through. After it goes through those bar screens, then we come out here for grit removal. So in this grit removal area, the flow slows way down, and it allows heavy and dense particles to settle out, things like sand or coffee grounds or eggshells and things like that before it moves on. And the reason for this is we want to protect the equipment that's downstream, other pumps, other things like that. After grit removal, we head on down and we go to primary clarification. So these are settling tanks or sedimentation basins, also called primary clarifiers, and you can see 3 of them. There's 1, 2, 3 kind of in the background there. We'll walk by them as we go. Basically what's going on here is other particles that didn't settle out in grit, so like kind of other big heavy things, settle out in these primary clarifiers, and then you can kind of see this water that is coming over. It looks a little grayish. That water is called primary effluent, and it moves on to the second stage system. So we're gonna walk over there now. We'll just take a peek over here. You can see how gray the water looks. Not a lot of people think that this is the color of raw wastewater. The raw wastewater is often quite gray like this. So here's our first primary clarifier. You can see this arm that's moving around. It's moving very slowly. I'll stop when we're right next to it so that you can see it's actually moving. So you can see this arm is moving, and it's sweeping these floatable components. We call it scum, sweeping those over to this part over here, which we call the scum beach. Not really a beach you want to sit on and get a tan, but that's what they call it, a scum beach. And if we look underneath the water here, you would see a parallel arm down at the bottom that's sweeping what we call the sludge, or the settled solids, and that all goes down into a hopper that's in the middle, and then those solids get pumped out and sent over across the plant to solids handling. So we're following the flow here, and after the flow comes from the primary clarifiers, out of the top of the primary clarifiers, it goes to this first stage aeration tank. So that's where we're going to go right now. This is where biological treatment happens. What we had seen before was mainly physical treatment. So settling, sedimentation, screening, things like that. Now we're going for biological treatment. So if you were to put a sample of this under a microscope, you would see a whole bunch of microbes in there, bacteria and all kinds of other things that are helping us do the treatment. Now take a look at the color of the water here, and you'll see that it's very brown almost. That brown color comes from the microbes. Because if we come over here where our water is being introduced, you can see right over here, you can still see that gray color of this water that's coming in. And as it gets mixed in here, it kind of gets mixed in and turns brown because of all the microbes that are in there. So what's happening here is you'll see kind of a quiescent surface. There's a bunch of mixers that you can see, some red cables coming down over here, red cranes and cables. There are mixers mounted on the bottom of each of those. 1, 2, 3, and there's one over here. And those mixers help keep all of the bacteria and other organisms in suspension so that they can do the treatment. And in this zone, there's no air that's being added. It's called an anaerobic zone, and we use that for biological phosphorus removal. And then a little farther down, they introduce some what's called return mixed liquor. So it comes from the end all the way back over to here, and there's a bunch of nitrate in there, and that's used for total nitrogen removal. So this part of the process, we call it an A2O, or anaerobic anoxic oxic process, A2O, and it's used for both biological nitrogen and phosphorus removal. So after our initial two anaerobic and anoxic phases, we move into this what's called an oxic or aerobic phase, and you can see all the bubbles on top here. Down at the bottom of these is a grid of these aeration diffusers. So it's these little discs that have a membrane over the top of them, and air is pumped in there, and these little bubbles of air are pumped in to introduce oxygen into the reactor. And we do that because the microbes that are in here can then consume carbon, biochemical oxygen demand, and also things like ammonium and convert it into nitrate. The nitrate then gets sent back to this anoxic zone where it can be converted into nitrogen gas. There are many different ways that we can add air into our system. This is one with diffusers and blowers. At the Amherst Wastewater Treatment Facility in Amherst, Massachusetts, they use what are called mechanical aerators. And if you want to take a look at that one, just look at the other video, and you can see they act by splashing water up from the surface rather than bubbling air from the bottom. The way the flow goes here, it starts down at that end and it runs all along this way, and then it passes underneath this gate here, and then it goes this way, and then it makes one more pass, and then at the end it all comes out down here and into this channel, and then into this distribution structure right over here. So you can see we have one basin that's not aerated, it's anaerobic, anoxic, and then 3 aerated basins. We need more time for aeration because the kinetics of what we're trying to do, especially with the ammonia, removing ammonia and converting it into nitrate, is a little slower. So we go into another basin here, and then that flows into our distribution structure, and then it goes into the clarifier. You'll also notice that there's only one train here. So their biological treatment is happening mostly right here. And that means that if they have a problem with one of these diffusers, they need to be able to shut down one of these aeration tanks. I'm standing on a channel right now. So there's water flowing underneath me. And the way this system is set up, they have all of these gates here. So you can see these gates like this. It allows them to raise and lower those so they can divert the flow around if they need to do maintenance on one of the tanks. Something really important to think about as a designer while you're designing a facility like this is to think about the operators and how they're going to operate and maintain and clean their facility. You'll also know that I'm here in the summer, so kind of maybe start thinking about what are the differences that we might see, how are things different operating in the summer compared to in the winter. Well, we know that bacteria grow faster when it's warmer out, and so the kinetics of this treatment is going to be faster. We also know that it's going to rain less, so the flows are going to be lower, which creates an interesting dynamic of what's happening in this facility. Their permit limits are also lower during the summer, so they need to account for that. All right, so now we go over to this distribution structure. And it looks like we have all 4 clarifiers going right now. So in here, in this distribution structure, the water from the far end of our aeration basin, after it comes out of there, goes into this distribution structure, and then it gets distributed among these 4 secondary clarifiers. These are very similar in nature to the primary clarifiers that we saw earlier that are kind of in the background over here. But instead of settling out particulates that were in the influent water, now we're trying to settle out all those microorganisms that we grew. So we can go take a look, and I'll walk over into the middle here. The water, that mixed liquor water from the end of the aeration basin, flows into the center of these clarifiers, and then it flows out radially. So you can kind of see these turbulent areas right here. This is where the water is being introduced, and you can kind of see all these little small bits of things. We call them flocks. So those flocks are all trying to settle, and in fact, as soon as we get outside of this ring, you can see that the water clears up quite a bit, and that's because a bunch of settling has happened. Our rake arm, very similar to what we saw with the primary clarifiers, is continuing to move around. And again, we're sweeping scum off of the top, and there's one at the bottom to sweep the sludge into the center, and that's way down underneath where I am here. Actually, you can see it here. They have this system set up where this is the return sludge in the middle here. It's being forced up from the bottom into here, and then it's being pumped out of the center ring. Sometimes there are even ducks that like to swim in the clarifiers. So after secondary clarification, this is an unusual plant in that they have a 2 sludge system. So you can see how clean the water is. Let's actually take a look at this in a little more. You see all the little ducklings there? That's kind of cute. See how clean the water is in this effluent channel? So from here, there's actually still a bit of nitrate in the water. And so it goes on to further treatment because they have a pretty strict nitrogen permit limit. So it goes on to additional biological treatment in the second sludge system, which we'll go take a look at in a minute. But for now, I want you to take a look at the water. Remember back to the primary clarifier water, how gray that was, and look at how clean it is here. Pretty tremendous what we can do just by relying on gravity and naturally occurring microbes and a little bit of air. So now we're going to walk over. The water from here, from these secondary clarifiers, goes over to another system, the second stage biological treatment system. More baby ducks. So in the first stage, we had biological nitrogen removal, biological phosphorus removal, and also BOD removal. In this second stage, which you can see here, we're only focused on nitrogen removal and really on removing nitrate. So you can see that this is not mixed at all, or I'm sorry, this is not aerated, it's only mixed. And again, you can see mixers here and there. They also have a couple of sensors along the way. So flow comes in here. They have a bunch of microbes. Again, you can kind of see the it's a little rustier colored here. The color of this, we call it mixed liquor, is a little different than it was in the first stage. And they're feeding methanol. So over here, you see that little roofed hut there? There is a methanol storage tank underneath there, and they feed methanol to help remove the nitrate. It provides a carbon source, and it provides an electron acceptor for an electron donor, excuse me, for the nitrate, which is the electron acceptor. So the nitrate becomes denitrified, NO3 goes to N2 gas, and you can kind of see some bubbles coming up right over here. That's from nitrogen gas that's being released by the microbes. This whole treatment stage is just for reducing their total nitrogen and decreasing the amount of nitrate that they discharge in their effluent. So after these two anoxic zones, 1, 2 here, that go in series, so flow goes down this way, it comes back up this way, and then it goes out that way, we have a final re-aeration zone. So this is to make sure that all the nitrogen gas that was in there gets released, and also to make sure that any excess methanol that might have been fed is able to get released as well. They don't want to feed excess methanol, but you know, this is here just kind of as a backup for that. They can't have very much carbon or biochemical oxygen demand in the water that they discharge, so they need to make sure to have this re-aeration zone, they call it, to drive off any of that extra stuff. At this facility, they rely pretty heavily on these sensors to make sure that they're feeding the right amount of methanol. So they have nitrate sensors in here that monitor the amount of nitrate, and then they can adjust their methanol dose automatically based on the amount of nitrate that's in this reactor. They also have an automatic chemical adjustment system to feed ferric chloride to reduce phosphorus, just in case they don't get enough biological phosphorus removal up in the first stage system. And that seems to work really well for them. It allows them to rely as heavily as possible on the biological treatment and minimize their use of ferric chloride. Over here for the second stage, we call it the second stage system, it's a second sludge system. There's another distribution box. And there's another set of clarifiers here. And because the carbon source for these the microbes that grow in this second stage system is methanol, or mostly methanol, they grow pretty slowly. And so they only actually have to remove sludge from this system about once or twice a month, which is different than the first stage system up above, where they have to remove extra microbes about once every day. So let's go in. I just want to take a look at this water here. There's a bunch of algae growing in, but you can still see how clean that water is coming over here. And we'll go in, we'll take a look at the final effluent in a minute, and you can really see how clean that water is. The construction project that they're working on right now will take this effluent, this second stage secondary effluent that is coming out of these troughs here, and it'll send it over to a new pumping station, which will then be sent up to some deep bed upflow sand filters that'll be positioned up here where you see all the construction happening there. Those sand filters are just for phosphorus removal, just to remove some extra particulates, some extra particles, to make sure that they can meet a really low phosphorus permit limit. For now though, flow goes from these second stage secondary clarifiers and it goes to disinfection, which I'm gonna walk over to right now. All right, so after those second stage secondary clarifiers, we come over here to disinfection. Sodium hypochlorite is what they use. It's also known as bleach. So they add bleach here into the water to disinfect or kill a bunch of microbes that are in here, including pathogens and any other excess microbes. So you can see the water then comes in here and it's gonna flow in this kind of serpentine pattern. Let's take a look over here. Maybe I'll get a bird's eye view in a second. But it flows all along here. And the reason we have this kind of serpentine pattern is to allow enough contact time to allow the chlorine to do its work and do the disinfection. So you can see here the flow will go like this, kind of like that, and then back here and like this. We have two side-by-side chlorine contact chambers here, so they can actually take one of these offline, unlike what we saw up at the first stage where there was one set of aeration basins, right? They can take a completely separate side of this offline if they need to do maintenance on it. After that, there may be some chlorine that's left in the system. So then we go to what's called dechlorination, and where we add a little bit of extra chemical to remove excess chlorine before it gets sent out into the river. You can see here, sparkling, beautiful water. And here we have dechlorination, so there's a chemical being added here for dechlorination. And then it goes down through what's called re-aeration. We want to make sure that when the water goes into the river, it has plenty of oxygen in it so that we don't kill fish and other life forms. So we go through this cascade re-aeration step, and then it heads out to the river. So you can see just how clean and clear the water is here. It's very nice, very clean water. The folks at Meriden do a fantastic job of keeping this facility running and keeping the environment clean. And I think it's a great example of kind of a unique facility that has a two-stage sludge system for biological treatment, and they're very low on both their nitrogen and phosphorus, and they're getting an upgrade right now to remove even more phosphorus. And I'm going to come back in maybe a year or so after this project is completed, and we'll do another video tour with the operators to kind of see how things are going for them. Okay, so here we are at solids handling. So the sludge that settles out, those biosolids, all those microbes that settle out of the second stage or the secondary clarifiers, all get taken up. Most of them get sent back to the beginning of the process, right? So that we keep recirculating those microorganisms, but some of them get removed in what we call waste activated sludge, and they get sent here to what are called gravity belt thickeners. So the sludge will just come in here, and then it flows down there, and then you'll see underneath here, I'll show you on the other side, there's a belt underneath there, and water flows out by gravity so that eventually we get thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker sludge until we end up here where it kind of looks something like this. So it goes from something like maybe 1% solids or somewhere thereabouts up to maybe 6 or 7% solids down at the end here. And here is another gravity belt thickener that you can see, and it's open, so there's this white belt that just rotates around, and it's got a bunch of small perforations in it to let water go through and the solids stay on top. This pipe right here is for odor control, so it sucks air out of there so that it doesn't smell super bad. And I'll go underneath and show you what it looks like from the other side too. So here you can see all the water coming off of the bottom of this gravity belt thickener. So this is the clean water that's coming off of the bottom, being removed from that sludge, and then it's being sent down here and then back into the process. So after this, after the gravity belt thickener, they go up to what's called a belt filter press to remove even more water, and it gets it up to maybe around 18 to 20% solids, and then it gets trucked off site from there.